Right, welcome back, everybody. The G20 Group of 20, that's what it stands for, is an international forum for the governments and central bank governors from 20 major economies. It was founded in 1999 to strengthen the global economy by basically bringing together the major advanced and emerging market economies to promote international financial stability. Alongside the G20, the group also hosts separate meetings of finance ministers and central bank governors. So for more on the 2016 summit, South Africa was represented by President Jacob Zuma, who also was accompanied by Maite Nkoane Mashabane, the International Relations and Cooperation Minister, as well as Pravin Gordhan, the Minister of Finance. But to make sense of the past 2 days summit, let's chat to Lesiba Mathata. He, of course, is the Chief Economist at Investment Solutions. Good to have you. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
So, the last 2 days, this year's theme, working towards an innovative, invigorated, interconnected and inclusive world economy. That's the theme we're dealing with.
Mouthful, hey.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a mouthful. What did you make of it?
It's an interesting meeting because the world is at a situation where growth is below potential. You see it in the US, you see it in Europe, you even see it in countries like Japan. Well, China is an interesting place to host this meeting because its growth has slowed, and there has been fear that whatever is happening out of China will have ripple effects elsewhere. Yeah. So it was quite an interesting meeting that they've put out at the forefront of that discussion, innovation. They're also pushing back on the trend that one is beginning to see of countries protecting themselves against others. In fact, the whole globalization scaling down, so there was a whole lot of discussion to that end.
Yeah, I mean, South Africa are fitting into this picture as well. I mean, it's a big platform for us, and it's something obviously we need to make a major presence, particularly with the financial situation that we find ourselves in. The workings of South Africa there. Just talk to us briefly about some of the work that our President, Finance Minister, International Relations was happening.
So it's separate conversations. There's a whole thing about tax. In other words, making sure that corporates don't use tax havens to illicitly hide profits in order not to be taxed. South Africa contributes a lot to those type of meetings, and also just generally around the emerging market rhetoric, which is that they're now important. In fact, all these G20s combined together, they make 85% of global GDP. I think China hosting it there, it is also exerting itself. Remember, China is part also of BRICS, which South Africa is part of. So with China taking charge in the world and leading a financial reform, so to speak, and a financial revolution, later in October, they're going to be included in the International Monetary Fund's special drawing rights. In other words, it hasn't happened in a long time in history that a new currency outside yen or the British pound or even the US dollar or the euro, that we've seen a new currency being included in that basket. And now the Chinese will be included in October, which I think is a big thing. They are part of BRICS. We have seen reports also from that meeting around the BRICS Development Bank, although it still remains a political conversation. We're yet to see the business side of it. In other words, who has it lent to? It remains a very important interaction for South Africa to be part of. BRICS G20.
Yeah. Well, I want to just focus on this because I was reading an article yesterday about the fact that we've seen a lot of funders moving away from our state entities and not wanting to fund them. I mean, that was the big news last week.
Yeah.
But there was talk that the BRICS Bank could actually fund some of our state entities. Did you read this report, or did you make anything of it?
I've seen those reports. I'm yet to see who they've lent to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And under what business construct do they have? They're not fully functional yet.
Okay.
Now, it's unfortunate to have domestic capital halting lending. Although there could be alternative finance put elsewhere or sourced elsewhere, it's just in an unfortunate situation that we find ourselves here. While BRICS can provide funds, I don't think it's something to be celebrated, because we need financial markets that are functioning better. We need all participants in the private sector participating with state-owned enterprises and making sure that this country move forward. It's an unfortunate situation that we have to use the BRICS Development Bank as an alternative source of finance while there's ample liquidity in the economy.
Yeah, which is, that's I suppose that's a conversation for another time at this point. We'll still have to focus on what happened at the G20. You know, I'm reading headlines about it. Obviously, after all is said and done, there's all the analysis and the back and forth of whether it was a success, whether it wasn't a success. One of these headlines that caught my eye, however, said... It went on to say that China's G20 was big on show, but very short on substance.
Yeah.
And that always seems to be a gathering of this nature. It always seems that, you know, the show is there, it's all, you know, big talk and all of this, but the substance just always fails short of making any a substantial difference. But the biggest winner here was China. China already having said it was just victorious of having it in Beijing and getting all these leaders there. Again, do you agree? I mean, China the biggest winner out of all of this?
I think so. This is a big year for them. G20 under their belt, part of the SDR soon under their belt, important economy in the globe under their belt now, their second largest economy. So I think it was an important gathering that was held there. But what is interesting, however, is that all these big leaders in China challenged China at home. And they said, you are producing steel in excessive quantities and flooding the global economy with steel. It's just a lament that it came out from Japan, came out from Europe, it even came out from the US. And you'll see that there's a steel dumping that's happening elsewhere. If you look domestically, the domestic steel industry is suffering as a result, not only because of that, but there are a few other things that contribute to the slowdown that's happening domestically. But it was quite telling for me that leaders took on China on steel at home, and they conceded. And they said they will scale down their production to make sure that they're not dumping steel in the globe.
Yeah. Again, focusing on Africa, because you look at what the G20 actually does for Africa, and if in fact this was successful for them, there's a lot of word going around saying we have 10 times more direct investment in the European Union than we have in the whole of Africa. This is what Chancellor Angela Merkel told the leaders at the G20. So could African countries benefit from this G20 meeting? What do you think? What is your answer to that?
Yeah, I think Africa should be a major beneficiary. It's just represented by South Africa at this point in time. And South Africa does have an African interest at whole in this type of meetings. There's no other African countries that participate in these discussions. I do think that Sub-Saharan Africa, while it's seeing growth dampening, particularly on the western side of the Sahara, oil prices have ravaged those economies, Angola, Nigeria, Ghana. But if you look at broadly what could happen going forward, especially when there's commodity super cycle that can actually turn around, Sub-Saharan Africa still provides opportunity for faster growth. Despite the slowdown. In fact, I did a study to look at top 10 fastest growing economies globally, as expected by the International Monetary Fund for the next 10 years. And there we found 3 out of the 10 resided in Sub-Saharan Africa. It included Ethiopia. Remember, Ethiopia is growing at 10% and expected to only slow down to 7%, but is the fastest growing economy in Sub-Saharan Africa, along with Mozambique. All these countries actually are doing very well. I think it continues, Sub-Saharan Africa, to present opportunity of investment within the G20 countries, and I do think that a representation of South Africa, which ought to be a lot more sub-Saharan in its expression, should be much more forthcoming at G20.
Yeah, I do love that the German Chancellor is taking this standpoint now, instead of just focusing on Africa when it comes to aid. Rather look at foreign direct investment. Invest in Africa. These are markets, they're profitable markets, something we need to really, really look at. It's quite interesting that Germany is taking a standpoint like this and wanting to invest more here. No, the Germans don't do these things just for fun and to be nice. What are they seeing? I mean, what is it that perhaps we're not understanding, or that she's trying to work towards?
Well, Germany is the largest European economy. It's about 35% of that region. And for them to say that it carries weight, I think what they're saying is that many economies are diversifying away from commodities. You look at Nigeria, has structural reform underway in terms of diversifying away from petroleum. You see agriculture, in fact, being at the forefront of such conversation. You also see even agriculture as a theme coming out in the eastern side of the Sahara, particularly out of Ethiopia. Also Kenya.
Yeah, Kenya is very big as well.
Also down south, there's a whole conversation around agriculture. Mozambique, which is the fastest growing down south here. So all these conversations just suggest that when politicians and governments begin to do the right things, prioritize investment, clean up the outcome in terms of corruption, also central banks that becomes more focused on inflation, which is the outcome now in sub-Saharan Africa. Inflation is under control, although it's still high. In some countries, it's still in double digits. Generally, we are seeing a decline in the inflation rate. That is good for investment for countries like Germany or elsewhere, any other investor. So what we find, even those that are in the alternative sides of investments, when alternatives, I'm talking about private equity firms, all those funds actually are finding value in sub-Saharan Africa.
Which they certainly are. We're going to have to unfortunately leave it there, but I find this conversation very, very interesting. And I think one of the interesting topics to look at as well is that perhaps the world is seeing how much China is benefiting with trade in Africa and their grip in Africa, and they're getting a little bit worried and thinking, listen, I think we need to move in there. China's pipping us to this one, and we're falling behind, particularly when you look at Germany, who are great in South Africa with their product, but the rest of Africa, obviously untapped markets. Thank you so much. It was really interesting chatting to you. We're just giving a little bit of an update on what happened there at the G20 summit. It ended. It was a 2-day summit. Lesiba Mathata is a chief economist at the Investment Solutions, and it was great having him here in studio. Let's take a break. We'll see you after this.